So ProctorExam is the technology provider behind the different slide that we've seen this morning about online invigilation. We are a Dutch company based in Amsterdam, and we've been working since 2018 very closely with the BTL team, and Sam, who is in the room today, that I thank particularly for the work we've been doing, and Alex Fleming, who is not in the room, I think, now. But it's the right moment to extend thank you. So we've been working closely since last year to offer an additional delivery option as part of the BTL network, as Emma just rightly presented. And during the next 15 minutes, my objective is going to be to share with you some of the learnings in the process and also give you some idea of opportunity that are now in front of us as the modality is starting to gain in momentum. So, as you might have noticed during your tendering process, while remote invigilation is still a growing modality, it is already a very competitive field. So at ProctorExam, we choose to actually focus on the technology behind online invigilation, which is basically providing a streaming and recording infrastructure for the multimedia content that is shared for online invigilation. That technology, we make it as a package that you can embed within a broader assessment ecosystem. And I talk about assessment ecosystem because since this morning, it's very clear that the type of implementation you can have in your respective organization is composed of a number of pieces from registration to marking of the exam. And that technology being a piece of the puzzle give the test organizer all control on the data, the process, and the experience of remote invigilation. And because we understand the importance of implementation and support in the process, we work in the background and hand in hand with our experienced partners team to deliver a coherent and reliable experience for all the stakeholders in the process. So this morning, quite surprisingly, I ended up sitting next to Janet Legg, who is in the room today with us, who has been one of our first customer to actually take on the modality of remote proctoring. And so Janet will be able to give us some updates on this partnership at the end, just after my talk, which would be good because this video obviously was shot in September last year. So we've had a number of exam sessions since then, which is going to be quite insightful too. So ProctorExam is deeply rooted as a European company, and we build our product and our company around the European regulation. At this stage today, this is GDPR consideration that are driving more than 70% of our new business opportunities, and even from North American providers that are actually looking at addressing the concerns of candidates who have privacy concern in regards to the practice of remote invigilation. Since the beginning of the year, there are candidates in more than 140 countries that have used our infrastructure to take a test remotely. And we are achieving a triple-digit growth in terms of usage of our platform year on year across higher education, as you can see some of our reference at the bottom, but also professional certification across Europe and North America. Since the beginning of the year, we've read also a lot. I was trying to make the count by preparing that presentation, and I stopped at 2,000. That's at least the number of tender pages that I've been reviewing since the last 9 months that were touching closely or at distance the topic of online proctoring. And something that is very clear is across the market that I've been reviewing and scrutinizing, whether it is in the UK, in the Netherlands, or in France, there is an evident element. Online invigilation is still a black box, and it's looked at in silo from the rest of the assessment journey. And a number of reasons for that. This is obviously a growing practice, but this is also because suppliers don't provide still too little information on their process, and therefore we end up with still just a few large-scale implementation. So that's on this basis that I prepared for today, which was supposed to be tomorrow, an insight session. So I prepared 3 insights, which I will share right now with you. So to start with, my first insight is really to look at the data that are behind remote invigilation. So for instance, we talk a lot in the industry about automated proctoring, which I would argue is rather augmented proctoring rather than completely automated, especially in light of GDPR regulation. But other use cases that we should be looking at are the type of data across the entire assessment journey that we could combine together. So for instance, we were looking this morning at the richer profile that we are currently getting through computer-based testing. And suspicion of fraudulent activity is not only limited to what you can see with your own eyes. Currently, with the type of individual data you will have with time spent on item, revision history, or even regression analysis will provide you some guidance in the type of session that will require more scrutiny. This is something that I will call selective proctoring. And selective proctoring is not only there to address some business and budget constraint, but also provide means for larger scale implementation. Another example that we should be considering, and I think Emma brought it very nicely before, is the type of convergence that we can have between the practice that are going on off-site or on-site, sorry, and online. So, for example, the type of check that are realized right now in regards to the security to access a test center and the type of check that are realized to access a session online are informing each other. And as we grow and as the practice are developing across the different modality, we should be looking at how we can handle identity management in a standardized level across test centers and online practices. For example, through the step of onboarding, when we start an exam, we provide a number of steps where the candidate is asked to provide and show identity proof that have been already provided as part of the registration or booking process. We could very well think about real-time comparison between a reference database and the type of distribution that we are using in order to have a standardized approach and more control on the identity of the candidate accessing tests. And the technology is not only bringing us standardized way to look at the data aspect, but it's also changing the standardized aspect of human management. Last week, I was at the EATP conference, and a colleague from PSI was presenting some finding of research on a comparison between cognitive task analysis and job task analysis to build a domain knowledge expertise. And guess who were the subject of her research? Any idea? The remote proctors. So as the industry is looking to automatize more and more the type of supervision that we will give on the test, we will also develop more standardized and norm way of looking at the practice, including remote proctoring. Last but not least, one key stakeholder that I haven't mentioned yet, which is the candidate. Currently and traditionally, test experience have been leaving very few room to instant feedback. And when you think about the introduction of such an infrastructure that is online invigilation, you do not only provide vision of the candidate workstation, but you also provide a real-time and supervised channel for communication. I was discussing with our support team last week a case of a candidate experiencing some technical issues. And as we were reviewing the session, we actually realized that the test design didn't take in consideration how the candidates were actually using the item or all the item present in the text, in the test. For example, there were a number of huge appendix, heavy, lengthy, that were open throughout the test, and for a test of 5 hours, remained open for the entirety of the assessment. At the end of the 3 hours, the computer starting to obviously slow down, because when you imagine the type of resource it requires, some machines are still at limited capacity. So by looking at invigilation data, we were not only able to provide some insight for optimization of the test, but also think about how we communicate ahead to the candidate and therefore bring more a better user experience and better data in terms of test completion. So those examples are just thought starters for me and for you to think about a more collaborative way to look at all the solutions that we bring together in an assessment journey. And I'm pretty sure you've got way more idea and you can make that list richer. So please feel free to come tomorrow morning. I will be assisting Samurai in a play session at 11 o'clock that will be completely dedicated to the experience of online proctoring. So feel free to come and join the conversation. Thank you very much.